All right, let's jump right in. We're tackling some Mexican legal code today. You know, the kind that makes you go, what? When you first read it.
Yeah, it can be a bit dense, but there are some really interesting bits in there about societies, partnerships, and beings property.
Right. And how those two things connect in the eyes of the law. I have to admit, I'm pretty curious to see what we uncover. We've got excerpts from the actual legal text, some in Spanish even, so this will be fun.
It is fascinating to see how another country approaches these concepts. It really gives you a new perspective on familiar things.
Exactly. So, shall we dive in?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Okay, so first things first, how does Mexican law actually define a partnership? I mean, we all have an idea of what it means, but I'm guessing the legal side is a bit more, shall we say, specific?
Oh, absolutely. It's not as simple as just shaking hands and saying, we're partners now. Article 2588 in the materials you sent, that's the starting point.
Okay, Article 2588.
Yeah.
Got it. So what does it say?
It talks about combining resources, which makes sense. But, and this is interesting, it stresses that the partnership's goal has to be primarily about economics, not just speculation.
Wait, hold up. So I can't just partner up with someone on the assumption that, like, vintage rubber duckies are going to be the next big thing.
Exactly. You've got to have a solid plan, an actual business goal, not just a hope that something will magically become valuable.
So it's about actually doing something, not just dreaming of riches.
You got it. And this is where it gets really interesting.
Oh, tell me more.
Article 2589 talks about what each partner contributes, and it's not just money. You can contribute your work, your skills.
Wait, really? So, like, if I'm amazing at designing websites, but I'm a little short on cash, my design skills could actually count as my contribution to a tech startup.
Exactly. That's what makes this so fascinating. Your apportation, your contribution, it's not just about who has the deepest pockets.
That's really cool. I like how that levels the playing field a bit, you know? It recognizes that everyone brings something unique to the table.
Precisely. And speaking of bringing things to the table, Article 2590 gets into the nitty-gritty of partnership agreements, and it's clear you need everything in writing.
Makes sense. No more, but you promised me arguments later on.
Exactly. It protects everyone involved, and if you're dealing with major assets, especially beans and mutables, think land, buildings, that sort of thing, you might even need a public notary to make it official.
Wow, so they're serious about making sure everything is legit. No backroom deals or shady handshake agreements.
It's all about transparency. But there's a fascinating twist in Article 2591. It says even if you mess up the paperwork somehow, the partnership is still valid between the partners.
Really? So it's like a secret pact, valid if you're in the know, but maybe not so much in the eyes of the law.
It's a bit of a loophole, but there's a catch. The article says this internal agreement, it can't be used against outsiders. So imagine you didn't formalize your partnership and a supplier is owed money.
Oh, I see. They could be in a tough spot if they didn't make it official. So it's like a secret society. What happens in the partnership stays in the partnership. But if you want to play by the rules of the outside world, you got to make it legal.
Exactly. And this emphasis on clarity and fairness, it seems to be a recurring theme in these articles. Almost like they're trying to prevent conflicts before they happen.
Which, let's be real, is probably a good strategy when it comes to partnerships, right? No matter how well-intentioned everyone is, things can get messy.
Absolutely. Especially when you're talking about things like property ownership, which can get complicated fast. And that's something these Mexican legal excerpts really seem to be aware of.
It's almost like Mexican law is saying, hey, we know partnerships can be tricky, so let's lay down some ground rules to make sure everyone's on the same page. Kind of refreshing, actually.
It is. And this focus on fairness, it really comes through in some of these articles, like Article 2596. It flat out says you can't have a partnership where one person gets all the profit and the other takes all the risks.
Whoa, seriously. So even if I'm the one putting in all the late nights building the business, my partner who's, say, handling the money, we still split the rewards and the losses.
That's what it's saying. It emphasizes this shared responsibility, which is pretty cool when you think about it.
Yeah, it really goes against that whole every man for himself mentality you see sometimes in the business world.
Yeah.
It's more like we're in this together, for better or for worse, right?
Exactly. And that shared fate, it extends to the assets of the partnership, too. Like we were talking about beacons and mutables.
The immovable stuff, the
Yeah.
buildings, the land.
Right. Article 2599 hints that if a partner's apportation, what they contribute, becomes attached to the property, like that oven in our bakery example, ownership can get kind of blurry if things go south. It doesn't really spell out how you divide things up, though.
Okay, so that's where lawyers come in handy. Better make sure that partnership agreement is airtight. But this whole idea of things being attached to the business, it makes you wonder, what about in the digital world?
Ah, that's a good one. These laws were clearly written with more tangible assets in mind, weren't they?
Right. Like, if someone contributes a killer logo design or maybe the code for a game-changing app, is that attached to the partnership in the same way a building would be?
Interesting question. And the excerpts we have, they don't really address that directly, but Article 2597 does talk about partners who contribute capital to money people. And get this, it basically says they're not guaranteed their money back plus a profit, even if the business is wildly successful.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
So even if I'm the investor who fronted the cash, I'm not automatically entitled to a bigger slice of the pie just because I took on more financial risk.
Seems that way. It's like the law is saying, hold on, money is important, but it's not the only thing that matters in a partnership.
Wow, that's kind of a radical idea in this day and age, isn't it? It's more about the collective effort, not just who has the biggest wallet.
Right. It's about recognizing the value that every partner brings, regardless of what they bring to the table. And speaking of which, what happens if you want to change the table itself, so to speak, like add a new partner or completely revamp your business model?
Ah, good point. Partnerships aren't static, they evolve.
Mm-hmm.
So what does Mexican law say about making changes to the agreement after it's been set in stone or, I guess, written down?
Well, thankfully, they anticipated that. Article 2598 talks about modifications, and spoiler, you can't just scribble a new rule on a napkin and call it a day. It requires unanimous consent from all partners.
Ah, so everyone has to be on board with the new plan. Again, it goes back to that transparency and fairness, doesn't it?
Exactly. No one feels like they're being left out or railroaded into something they didn't agree to. It makes you think these legal principles, they're not just about following the letter of the law, are they?
It's like they're trying to promote good communication and collaboration, which, honestly, are probably good skills to have in any relationship, business or otherwise.
Right. Absolutely. And it makes you wonder, how does this emphasis on shared decision-making and fairness actually play out in the real world? Are Mexican partnerships known for being particularly harmonious or long-lasting? It's like we've stumbled on a hidden door leading to a whole other layer of questions about culture and business practices.
And I love when that happens. Speaking of exciting discoveries, remember that mind-blowing question we had earlier about how the digital world might be turning all these traditional legal ideas on their head?
You mean about how these articles, with their focus on paper contracts and physical assets, might need a serious update for the age of online agreements and virtual collaborations? Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Right. I mean, would a simple email exchange hold up in a Mexican court as a legally binding partnership agreement? And what about those immovable assets? Do they need a whole new definition for the digital age? So many questions.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? It's like we've taken a deep dive into Mexican partnership law and come up for air with a whole new set of questions about the future of business, technology, and collaboration itself.
It's incredible, isn't it? These legal ideas, they're like a window into how people used to think about collaboration and ownership. But the core concepts, they still resonate, even in today's fast-paced digital world.
Absolutely. And that's something I really appreciate about these Mexican legal excerpts. It's not just about, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. It's about building a foundation of trust and mutual respect within the partnership.
Right. It's almost like they're saying, look, we know that even with the best of intentions, disagreements can happen, so let's make sure everyone has a voice and feels heard.
Exactly. And that emphasis on clear communication, on making decisions together, that's not just good legal advice. It's a recipe for a stronger, healthier partnership overall.
Totally. So as we wrap up our deep dive into these fascinating legal documents, is there anything that really sticks with you? Any final aha moments?
When we first started talking about those buy-ins and movables, those movable goods, we were really focused on physical things, right? Like our bakery oven. But the more I think about it, the more I wonder how that concept might apply to the digital assets that are so central to businesses today.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. So instead of a fancy oven, we're talking about like a killer website design or a super efficient inventory management system, things that are valuable to the business even if you can't physically touch them.
Precisely. They're attached to the business in a different way, but they're still incredibly important. And it makes you think, if that partnership were to dissolve, how would Mexican law handle those intangible contributions?
It's like a whole new frontier, legally speaking. Would those digital assets be considered property in the same way a building is? Would we need a whole new legal playbook for the age of digital partnerships? It's mind-boggling.
It really is. And while we might not have all the answers right now, it's these kinds of questions that keep the legal world exciting and constantly evolving.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've explored the intricacies of Mexican partnership law, uncovered some surprising connections, and even raised some thought-provoking questions about the future of business and technology.
It's been a pleasure joining you on this journey.
Likewise. And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for the complexities of partnerships, the importance of clear agreements, and maybe even sparked your curiosity to learn more about how different cultures approach these universal challenges.
Remember, the law is constantly evolving, and it's up to all of us to engage with these ideas, challenge assumptions, and shape the future of collaboration in a way that is fair, equitable, and beneficial for everyone involved.
Absolutely. So until next time, keep those questions coming, and who knows what fascinating topics we'll deep dive into next.